deferred until the weekly division this evening. Thank you, Deputies. And we move now to Understanding Order 38, Leaders' Questions. I call on Deputy Mary Lou McDonald.
Taoiseach, my understanding is that the audit into unnecessary hip surgeries carried out on children at CHI hospitals is now complete. Can you confirm that this is the case for the Dáil, please? And if so, can you tell us when that audit will be published? When I raised this scandal of unnecessary hip dysplasia surgery on children with you 4 weeks ago, you were unable to shed any light on the matter. You gave me no further information, and you certainly gave me no answers. So, a month on, I want to ask you again, how many children are caught up in this emerging scandal? Are we talking about hundreds, or is it more? How many letters have been issued by CHI to parents? What was the reference period for the audit? Is it years or is it decades? You see, Taoiseach, every single day our offices are receiving communication from parents in distress. They're left asking themselves the gut-wrenching question, was my child one of those operated on unnecessarily? What are the consequences of this for my child? One parent who's been in touch, well, their child was only 3 when they had surgery. And this is the first parent to tell me that they have now received clinical confirmation that their child didn't need the operation performed on them at a CHI hospital 3 years ago. This parent has now been told by a surgeon, having reviewed the scans from 3 years ago, that their child's hips were fine. The surgeon says that they would not have performed the surgery. So I think we need to let this sink in. Clinical confirmation that this child's surgery was not needed. This parent is absolutely devastated, Taoiseach. She told me that she can't believe what's happened. She describes it as like a horror film. She asks, why was my child diagnosed with a condition that they did not have? Why was my child put through the trauma of surgery if it wasn't needed? I just keep asking myself, why? Another of the mothers who reached out after she received the letter tells that her son had his left hip operated on in 2018 but was told his right hip was fine. He was called back, however, in 2021 and told that the right hip did in fact require surgery, despite displaying no issues. So she took the medical advice. She describes this as a devastating decision. She tells us her life son deteriorated dramatically following this operation. He now suffers serious health development complications and catastrophic consequences from the surgery. And the mother is overwhelmed, thinking that her child's surgery might not have been needed at all. Taoiseach, we've also received confirmation from a parent who received a letter whose child had the surgery in 2010. That's 15 years ago. The child is now a 20-year-old adult. So does this scandal, does this issue go back that far? Tá scandal na lani rinne obrád gon gá ag fós gach lá. Tá soléirú agus fragri a tastal inis. Cé bhéad lani atá I gceist the híisi. We've one parent whose clinical confirmation that their child's surgery wasn't required, and this scandal and stress is growing by the day. And remember, Taoiseach, your former health minister, Stephen Donnelly, knew about this a year ago, and yet he delayed, and parents are only dealing with this now. They can no longer be left in the dark. They need answers. They are entitled to that. So can I ask again, the reference period of the audit, how many children are affected? Is the audit complete, and when will it be published?
Dús baire ein team go with Shaw on a Freinach agus bore chama agus is olcon scale an what atá writer a good an prívród ná go méid an audit cuimseach agus go méid sé I gcuing cholua is féidir. At the outset, it is extremely serious, this situation, which has necessitated an external audit. That's the first point. And for any child to go through surgery is in and of itself a trauma. For parents, it is also a trauma. But if it emerges that children went through surgery that was not required in the first instance, that's not only very traumatic in itself, it is a scandal in itself. But I think it's important, Deputy, that we await the presentation of the audit and the completion of it to the Minister. The Minister, I spoke to the Minister yesterday, has not received any final draft or the completion of the audit. I've spoken to the Minister has made that point to me. It makes it very difficult all round then in terms of commenting in a piecemeal way or on an individual case or a case-by-case basis. I'm not in a position to do that today until the full comprehensive audit is finalised, presented to the Minister, to the Government, and obviously shared with this House. And it will be shared with this House. And yes, you're correct, CHI and CAPA have issued letters in recent weeks to families who may have concerns to provide information and so forth. But ultimately, it's the completion of the report is key here. And I understand there may have been drafts or whatever published in the ditch or elsewhere. I don't know. I can't speak about the provenance of that other than to say this, that the sensible thing for us to do is to enable Mr. Thomason, facilitate them to complete the report as quickly as possible now, given the anxiety, concerns that are undoubtedly out there. And that is accepted that those concerns will be there for families whose children would have gone through this particular surgery over a significant period of time. I understand the audit process is in its final stages. Feedback on the draft report has been received, I understand, by the expert author and is being reviewed. We simply have to assemble all of the facts in a comprehensive basis, await the outcomes of the clinical audit, and then decide on actions resulting from the outcome of that. And the entirety of what took place needs to be understood and laid out there fully and transparently. And as I say, then actions that would then be necessary that we would follow through on. And there are multidisciplinary teams in place in these hospitals in terms of preoperative decision making and right across CHI and CAPA, and that process has commenced from March onwards. So the hospital authorities are obviously taking on board the concerns and so on. It was raised initially via a protected disclosure back in September of 2023, relating to different thresholds for surgery being applied in CHI in the National Orthopaedic Hospital in CAPA. The department was notified in 2024. The clinical audit, as you know, has been conducted by Mr. Simon Thomas, consultant surgeon to the staff of the Children's Orthopaedics Unit at Bristol Royal Hospital for Children. And we simply have to await the completion of that. And I would hope it will be very sooner rather than later to help deal with the concerns and anxieties, but also to deal with the issue itself.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Tá an scéal go léir scanalach an dais, Taoiseach, ach tá sé scanalach freisin go bhfuil tuismitheoirí is páistí fágtha gan freagraí. I mean, this thing has dragged on and on. I said to you, your minister knew a year ago. And families then receive these letters, there's an audit underway, and then there's this unbearable, almost cruel wait and wait and wait. I have spoken to one parent who has told me they have clinical confirmation that the child underwent surgery that was not needed. That's one. I don't know, are there more? You say that we have to wait for the process to be completed. My information is that the audit is in fact completed. You told me, by the way, 4 weeks ago that this was in its final stages. That's not good enough, Taoiseach. It's not good enough to issue letters of something of this magnitude that government knew about for a year and more and leave families in that position. That, to my mind, is unacceptable. Can I ask you again, information that you do know or should know? Clarify, please, the reference period of the audit, how many letters have been issued and how many children are affected. And as Taoiseach, tell us, when do we see the audit?
First of all, I think it's regrettable that you would seek to politicise the issue, as you're attempting to do. Secondly, the first people who should always be contacted in a situation like this are the families who are affected. That is why correspondence goes from the authorities, in this case the hospital authorities or CHI, to the families. That is as it should be. They shouldn't be hearing about it in the piecemeal way or whatever, because they first and foremost need full transparency. Secondly, you must know this in your heart. It would be unacceptable to be trying to release piecemeal and case by case in this case. The sensible thing to do, and it is frustrating, people have to wait, but we do have to wait for the full audit. And in situations like this, which involves other, you're well aware of all of this, I know, but it doesn't suit in terms of, the politics of it. But the bottom line is this: a draft report gets sent to all who've been involved.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
The feedback has come back.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
The audit will have all of that information
Thank you, Taoiseach.
available for everybody, and that's the proper way to do this.
Deputy Ivana Bacik. Deputy Ivana Bacik.
Gurmagad Can Corla. Taoiseach, last Friday we learned that 15,418 people were recorded as homeless in March. Another shameful new high. Nearly 5,000 children are now growing up in Ireland without a home. And each homeless child is a tragedy. There's 22 more children homeless than last month. Taoiseach, this is a national scandal. It's the civil rights issue of our generation. And as legislators, we must do all we can to see this housing disaster addressed. We must build affordable and social homes, protect renters and tackle vacancy and dereliction. But your government is not doing enough of any of this. Taoiseach, your party, Fianna Fáil, has held the housing brief for nearly 5 years. For most of that period, you've simply doubled down on failed housing for all policies. More recently, it seems you're diversifying. You haven't launched anything like the radical reset that your Housing Commission sought and that we in Labour offered. Instead, Fianna Fáil has adopted a new strategy, a flying by the seat of your pants approach to housing, a series of solo runs, none of them based on evidence. Let's take some examples. This year alone, you've said, we might get rid of rent pressure zones. We might give tax breaks to developers. You're flying kites, Taoiseach, and no one can keep track. We're trying to figure out what you're planning to do on housing. And even your junior coalition partners in Fine Gael are being kept in the dark. Earlier this month, I think we all read with interest that Fine Gael councillors from Cork and Deputy Colin Burke had signed a cross-party letter to the Housing Minister calling for urgent funding for the tenant in situ scheme to ensure it is effective to keep renters out of homelessness. Today, Fine Gael councillor Tom O'Leary in Fingal has told the Dublin Inquirer, "I just cannot get over that they didn't maintain the same level of funding. Why would you mess with a successful scheme that keeps people from being scattered into the wind?" And he's right. Your changes to the scheme will render it unworkable. Taoiseach, we're hearing from councillors around the country that evictions from the private rented sector are driving the monthly increases in homelessness. So with your changes to the scheme, it seems you've given up on it. And have you given up on ending homelessness altogether? Of course, Taoiseach, there's another new policy, shrouded in secrecy so far, announced by Housing Minister James Brown, when he said, "We're going to create a new housing maverick, a fixer-in-chief." I know you don't like the name Czar, and nor do I, with its Russian connotations. So you're calling it the new Housing Activation Office. But it's another new policy which is clearly putting Fine Gael noses out of joint, as the Taoiseach has made clear. And it comes at an extraordinary and unjustifiable price tag. Maybe the Russian name is appropriate, because it's a price that might be approved of by a Russian oligarch, Taoiseach. But it's not acceptable. So Taoiseach, what exactly is the Housing Activation Office? What will it do? Will it be underpinned by legislation? All we've been told is it will put boots on the ground and coordinate delivery of housing, meaningless, and jobs that are already the jobs of the Minister for Housing, the Housing Department, and the Land Development Agency.
Thank you,
this
Deputy.
move looks like nothing more than an exercise in the evasion of accountability.
Taoiseach,
what will this body actually do?
First of all, I would disagree fundamentally with your analysis in terms of housing policy more generally. And Fianna Fáil and indeed the last government didn't double down on the policy of the last number of years or the last number of decades. The bottom line is that in 2023, for example, we saw the highest level of delivery of new build social housing since 1975. That's not doubling down on previous policies. That represents a step change in building of social housing, which has happened over the last 3 to 4 years. You cannot deny that. We have higher targets, but you can simply not deny the fact that 48,000 new social homes is not a step change from where we were before 2020. Whatever other hyperbole you will engage in, we have to try and deal in facts. And the only agenda I have as Taoiseach, and the government has, is to build as many houses as we possibly can, as fast as we can. That's it. And I will do everything that I possibly can to make that happen across a number of fronts. So you said we've ignored the Housing Commission. No, we didn't. But you did. Because and you put words, you made a false statement there. When you said that I said we might get rid of RPZ, never used those words once. Go and check it, please, and come back to me and find the quotation where you found that. What I did say was there was a review underway in the RPZs, which there is. Guess who suggested there should be a review of the RPZs? The Housing Commission. And I knew it when you feigned interest in the Housing Commission's report. You didn't really mean it, because if you look at the chapter on the rental market, it criticises the Oireachtas for its approach to the rental market. And it makes it very clear that we should explore issues of RPZs and so on. Not get rid of it, but explore it and give certainty to private sector investment. And I have said we need private sector investment in addition to public sector investment. Because the public sector this year will certainly go to 7 billion. ESRI estimate we need about, or others estimate 20 billion. State can't do it all. We need private sector investment. Your party and others have rubbished institutional funds as a vehicle for private sector investment into the housing market. It simply isn't credible. It's not credible or sustainable to suggest that you have a credible housing policy if you're ruling out that as a funding option for housing. Yet that's what you, Social Democrats and others, are doing, and have been doing for the last 4 to 5 years. Because it's populist, it's good short-termism, but it isn't going to build a house, Deputy. It isn't going to build a house. We need all hands on deck in relation to housing. We do need to unblock barriers on the ground.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
The Housing Activation Office is not a secret. It was in the programme for government, which was published.
Thank you,
No
Taoiseach.
secret about it at all.
Deputy Bacik.
Taoiseach, there's so much to challenge in what you've just said. With respect, first of all, you cannot stand over your government's figures on delivery of homes. Not when you promised 40,000 homes last year and the actual delivery was 10,000 short. That's a shocking shortfall. That's utterly indefensible. I don't think anyone, even in your government, even in Fianna Fáil, will stand over those figures. Secondly, you say you never said we would get rid of RPZs. I didn't say you did. I'm hearing every day from renters in my constituency, who are desperately worried because of the review of RPZs that your government has announced. And the reason they're desperately worried is because there is so few houses and homes available to rent, so that if they cannot afford to pay their rent any longer, they have nowhere else to go. So it comes back to delivery of homes. And you're ignoring the crucial recommendation of the Housing Commission that government should introduce a radical reset of housing policy. And that's what we in Labour had called for, to see the state take a far more active role in direct delivery of homes through the Land Development Agency, ramped up to provide state-built homes, as we did in the 70s, the time you keep referring back to as the golden age of house building.
Look, in the last 3 or 4 years, the then government, and Fianna Fáil Minister Darragh O'Brien, he gave power, he gave resources to the Land Development Agency. Its work is on the way. No, he did. So the Land Development Agency, and it will get more equity, it will get more support to build more houses. That's going to happen, okay? But that's not the full story. We have to do much more than that. The bottom line is this. We have made a step change in the last 3 years from about 20,000 houses that were being built in 2019. We're now building about 30,000 houses plus. We actually exceeded housing for all targets, but everybody said they weren't high enough. Fine, fine. So now we need to get to 50,000. ESRI is saying to all of us. The real challenge to all of you and to us on this side, how do we go from 30,000 to 50,000? I tell you what, we're not going to get there by populist, popular and sort of sound bites every week that we come into Dáil. That's not going to build 50,000 houses. We need solutions. We need solutions that can deliver. The government is going to do everything it possibly can across all aspects to get solutions. I'm not actually interested in sort of the short-termism that passes here for housing debate all of the time. I'm interested in getting real solutions to getting to that 50,000 per annum that we need.
Time is up. Deputy Cian O'Callaghan.
And yesterday, Taoiseach, the Social Democrats, did put forward a real solution to increase the finance available to build the construction of affordable homes, and I hope you will look at that seriously. Taoiseach, not content with creating a new €430,000 post for the housing czar, this government now wants to increase pay for senior executives in semi-states. Yesterday, Minister Jack Chambers announced plans to change rules that will see salaries soar. The heads of 30 semi-state bodies, everyone from Horse Racing Ireland to RTE, are now potentially in line for massive increases. This despite the fact that these CEOs received a combined €75 million in pay and perks over 10 years, according to Village magazine. Taoiseach, strangely, even though I carefully studied the Minister's statement yesterday, I didn't see any references at all to economic headwinds, tariffs or global volatility. When it comes to gold-plated salaries for those at the top, it seems these are concerns that are not worth mentioning. Compare that with how people on low pay are treated and the government's shameful decision to postpone the introduction of a living wage. Improvement in sick leave for ordinary workers has also been put on the chopping block, and in a triple whammy, plans to introduce pension auto-enrolment have also been kicked down the road yet again. Taoiseach, while all across the country people are struggling to make ends meet, to keep their homes heated, their rent paid and their bills from piling up, this government has mounted a despicable attack on low-paid workers. People should be able to live a full and dignified life and not just scrape by day to day. Taoiseach, I want to ask you, how can someone on the minimum wage afford housing costs that are more than double the EU average? How can they possibly afford bills that have increased 80% since Russia invaded Ukraine? And how are they supposed to put food on the table when prices for goods and services are 42% higher than in other European countries? Taoiseach, the cost of living is skyrocketing, and you expect people to get by on €13.50 an hour. Taoiseach, why does this government believe that those at the top deserve bumper salary increases while low-paid workers are thrown under the bus? And how can you possibly justify this to low-paid workers who are struggling to keep a roof over their head and food on the table?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
First of all, I would say to you, Deputy, that over the last 3 to 4 years, very significant improvements were made in terms of minimum wage, in terms of workers' rights, in terms of sick pay leaves. I mean, 2022 was the first time that we statutorily gave a right to employer-paid sick leave. 2022, the Sick Leave Act. And then you kind of use this exaggerated comment that we're engaging in despicable action against workers. Very significant, we went from 3 days to 5 days. Already, in January 24th, we increased it to 5 days. There had been 3 days initially provided for. And in terms of the minimum wage, that's been increasing quite significantly over the last number of years as a result of government decisions. And the minimum wage will continue to increase. The only issue, and I think to kind of net out two issues, we've decided to delay going from 5 days to 7 days. And in terms of the minimum wage, the delay is in respect of matching the living wage. And it will be a matter for the Low Pay Commission to determine the increase in the minimum wage. They're the only two issues. And then you create a narrative around those two issues that somehow there's an enormous undermining of workers' rights about to take place, which is not true. You mentioned auto-enrolment. Are you seriously saying delaying auto-enrolment from September to January is a trampling of someone's rights? We spent years putting it together, this government, two parties in government here, and we spent the last 3 to 4 years building up what was a very substantive programme in terms of getting auto-enrolment ready. In terms of the logistics of it, in terms of payrolls, providers and so on, The view is it should start with the tax year in January as opposed to September. That's all. So let's not pretend that it's some massive undermining of workers' rights or anything like that. I'm a complete convert to the idea of auto-enrolment. I'm not convert, I'm a believer in it, passionately believe in it. 800,000 workers will benefit from it. And we're going full steam ahead with it as a government. That's probably the most significant thing we will do for workers in this generation is auto-enrolment. It's been talked about for 30-odd years. And we are doing it, and we're going to do it. Now, the context, and you know it as well because you fought the recent general election as well. All of you came into the House talking about the retail industry, couldn't deal with the cumulative costs. They blame government. They had a point. We did increase costs through improving rights of workers and other things. And many retail SMEs and many hospitality SMEs said the cumulative impact of all of that was damaging employment and damaging their capacity to continue. And we had people in this House talking about closures of restaurants and closures of this, that, and so on. So it's always about striking a balance here in terms of how fast we go with progressive improvements. We did bring in the pay-related, the job seekers pay-related benefit scheme, which is a very significant improvement on anything that we had for the last 2 or 3 decades. That's a significant additional right for workers and well-deserved as well.
Deputy O'Callaghan.
Taoiseach, a living wage isn't just good for low-paid workers, it's also good for the local economy. Money that's put in the pocket of workers gets spent in the local economy and boosts local businesses and local jobs. So there's a very, very strong economic case for it. Do you not see, Taoiseach, that's an absolute kick in the teeth for people in low pay to hear about government proposals to increase pay for those in the top, while the excuses of tariffs and global headwinds and economic conditions is cited when it comes to delaying promises for low-paid workers and promises on a living wage? Can you not see that's absolutely, that puts people hugely under pressure to see that double standard in terms of the talk that comes out of government? So will you reconsider your position on the living wage and bring forward the living wage as you promised?
Thank you, Deputy.
Why can you do it for top-paid workers and not for people in low pay?
We have significantly increased the minimum wage. We've significantly increased it over the last number of years, and it will continue to increase. And by the way, you talk about the living wage. Government doesn't pay the living wage. You don't pay the living wage. Employers pay the living wage. Shops pay the living wage. Your local centre pays the living wage, is what you're saying. And you'll go in an election and talk to the local centre person and you'll say, oh yeah, you're dead right there, I'll talk to government about that. Which you did, by the way. Everyone did in the opposition. Said your costs are too high, you must do something about small business, you must do something about hospitality. This is an attempt to try and balance how fast and how rapid we make the progress. That's it. But don't try and conflate it into some major agenda that's anti-worker, because that is not what this is about in no shape or form. We're moving ahead with auto-enrolment. The pay-related is, I think, a very significant additional benefit which we can improve upon in time, and where the state will take a significant portion of that, which I think is important as well. And in terms of the semi-state, again, rather than the ad hoc approach which has gone on for the last 10 or 11 years, it is important to create a framework in terms of how senior executives are paid in the semi-state.
Deputy Michael Collins.
Thank you, Cian Corla. Taoiseach, I raised to you in the Dáil a few weeks ago of scandalous transactions by some financial advisors which have led to genuine investors getting stung for millions. Since raising this issue with you, Taoiseach, I have been contacted by numerous people who have had their honest savings robbed from them. The last time I spoke to you, I knew of around 10 people. Now I have at least 60 people in this situation, and the number is rising. The regulation and standards practice are the norm for many areas of work in the state. In healthcare, we have the Health Information Quality Authority, HIQU, conducting regular inspections of our health service to ensure standards are met and users are safe. In the food and hospitality industry, the Food Safety Authority ensures standards are met with regular inspections of premises. In the pharmaceutical industry, the European Medicines Agency regulates medicines for human use, ensuring their safety, quality and efficiency. In the financial services industry, regulation is the remit of the central bank, but yet regulation of financial advisors appears to be practically non-existent, leaving the ordinary investor at the mercy of some of these scrupulous individuals. How can a financial advisor take money from clients for investment in a company that is regulated by the central bank, provide loan notes which are not covered by the central bank, put the company into receivership while the client loses their money. That same advisor can then set up another company and start all over again with no repercussions, and some advisors have done this 11 times already. Taoiseach, I have reached out to the central bank seeking a meeting, but to no avail, thus leading me thinking, is this a further cover-up? The central bank are, in my view, equally culpable here, and this raises a number of questions for the central bank. What is the central bank doing in terms of regulation if financial advisors can fleece investors without impunity? How many audits of financial advisors does the central bank carry out each year? And will the central bank disclose these audits? Why are the loan notes unregulated? Why does the central bank allow financial advisors to behave in this manner without sanction? Many constituents in my constituency and in many other constituencies face financial ruination, have been let down by the central bank, while the financial advisors who they trusted and who they know was regulated under the central bank regulation has ran off with their money to another country hidden under the disguise of bankruptcy. A sample of the amounts constituents have been caught for is 750,000 one, 500,000 another, 350,000 another, 52,000, 50,000 and much, much more. Taoiseach, it is now obvious that the regulation by the central bank does not exist. Taoiseach, has the government the power to launch an investigation into the workings of the central bank? And will you work with me to get a meeting with the governor of the central bank to get answers to the many questions out there into the central bank regulated advisors who have robbed millions of euros of people's savings?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
Thank you, Deputy. And you did raise this, I think, a number of weeks ago. And there are laws there, and there is a regulator there, and the regulator is the central bank. And there is a tendency in the House to keep on saying, can we investigate this, can we investigate that? The established regulators have a function and an obligation to investigate if they receive complaints. I'm not clear whether the individuals who have been defrauded in this case, as you've asserted, have they made formal complaints in respect of that advisor that you were speaking about, or the companies that that advisor was involved in establishing? Have actual complaints been sent to the central bank in respect of that? I think it's important to establish that, because there are central bank registers. It's extremely important that customers are aware of the risk of fraud and related scams, and that they ensure that the person or entity that they're dealing with is registered with the Central Bank of Ireland. Those registers are available free online and so forth. And the Central Bank also publishes warnings about unauthorised firms, and sometimes will list these unauthorised firms. So again, I presume this person was a registered broker, and I will ask, maybe perhaps you could meet with the Minister of Finance in relation to this, to take the Minister through, because the Minister has, from a regulatory perspective or from a policy perspective, would have some interaction with the Central Bank, which is independent in terms of the conduct of its work. If a business is shut down, and you said in this case that business, or the suggestion is that it closed down, then another business was established by the same person, any new business will also require authorisation by the Central Bank before they can undertake activities which are regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. And that authorisation process requires and includes a Central Bank fitness and probity review for all the key roles to lead a business, and so forth. There is individual accountability frameworks within regulation. The Central Bank Individual Accountability Framework Act was introduced in 2023. That sets out clearly and fully where responsibility lies in regulated firms and includes conduct standards. And again, if the Central Bank suspects on reasonable grounds that a subject has committed a prescribed contravention, the Central Bank is in a position to hold an inquiry to determine whether or not the subject has committed a prescribed contravention. And again, there are strong sanctions in relation to individuals. So it would be useful, and you may have sent me stuff in the last hour. I haven't had a chance to go over that came in the last hour. But again, I will read that material. But it seems to me, and I'm not clear why the Central Bank have not engaged. I don't know whether you've written to the central bank, making the submissions to them in respect of the people that you've spoken about here.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
Thank you, Taoiseach. And yes, I wrote to the central bank, and I haven't 2 weeks ago, and I haven't heard nothing back from them since. And yes, there is law cases being taken at the moment. The fraud squad are also involved. And after I raised the question here in the Dáil, the last day fraud squad contacted some of the people immediately afterwards. Yes, I only sent you 2 cases, just 2 sample cases this morning, yourself and the Minister for Finance, but I respect that you need to have a look at that in your own time. When I talk about financial advisors, Taoiseach, I do not want to tar all of them with the one brush, as most are honest in their dealings, but I want to talk about those who are scam operators. Drive around, as I said in the last time I spoke to you 3 weeks ago, in top-of-the-range SUVs, are seen to be drinking champagne outside bars or street sides, laughing at those who now can't retire or have retired, robbed of their savings because of these despicable people who cannot be touched. Taoiseach, it is time to hit the untouchables. They have ruined innocent people's lives. It is time to have these people put behind bars. The only way this can be done is to have a full investigation into the central bank's procedures and weed out the reasons how these scam financial advisors were able to play nod and wink with the central bank and avoid any regulation.
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
First of all, Deputy, I welcome the fact that the fraud squad seem to be involved and are involved, as you said. That's good news. I think it's reprehensible for anybody to defraud another person of funding, and particularly their savings and in terms of fraudulent investments. And nobody is untouchable. They can be touched. They can be investigated. And there's a process for doing it. But we're always, in this country, going back to investigate the investigator. And we don't need an investigation into the central bank, I suggest. We need an investigation into the individuals whose fraudulent behaviour you've highlighted in the Dáil. That's what we need. That's why we establish regulators. That's why we resource regulators. And we put a lot of funding into regulators. And I do think fundamentally, into the future, the country must utilise existing regulatory authorities to do the majority of investigations. We love setting up commissions of investigation, inquiries that cost millions, spend years at it, and never getting, not in all cases, getting the closure that people want.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
There's real law here, there's real sanctions here, and in my view, we should pursue those avenues.
Thank you, Taoiseach. That concludes Leaders' questions. We now move to other members' questions. Under Standing Order 38A, I call on Deputy John Clendenin.
Ceann Comhairle. Taoiseach, Offaly and the wider Midlands have powered this nation for generations, first through peat and now through renewables. We've led from the front, but today we face a critical turning point in our energy and economic future. The Midlands Just Transition was meant to ensure that no community was left behind in the move to a climate-neutral economy. But for many in Offaly, it has felt like a promise made, but certainly not kept. With almost 700 job losses, we've lost more jobs in the energy transition than any other county, and the promised replacement of jobs has yet to arrive in any meaningful manner. We've seen plans, strategies and frameworks, but what we haven't seen are pay slips, tangible employment and tangible momentum on the ground. Yet, we remain determined. There are positive signs with state-funded projects like the EU Life, Peatlands and People Initiative, the Clonmacnoise Visitor Centre redevelopment, the refurbishment of Fiesta Hall Renewable Centre in Kilcormac, the enhancement of Lochbura Trails and culture initiatives like Film Offaly, to name just a few. But let's be clear, these projects must match the scale of disruption Offaly has endured, and so far they simply don't. Even so, Offaly has pushed ahead. While the Just Transition has faltered, we forged ahead with renewable energy. Ireland has made impressive goals in onshore wind, double the EU average, and Offaly has punched well above its weight. With just 2% of Ireland's landmass and population, we've delivered up to 7% of national wind energy output in recent months. Over 1.5 gigawatts of wind and solar projects are permitted or near permitted, and with nearly 600 megawatts of battery storage already in place. That success wasn't luck. It was strong local leadership, ambitious planning and community buy-in. We stepped up to the mark when we needed to most. Now, under Article 15b of the EU Renewable Energy Directive, the Government must publish maps identifying future renewable zones and grid infrastructure, only in a matter of weeks, May 21st. This is both a moment of opportunity and major threat. You may ask, what is the danger? A bureaucratic reset that treats all counties equally, ignoring the heavy lifting already done by early movers like Offaly. We simply cannot let this happen. Taoiseach, I urge you, let's start this mapping process by recognising reality. Start by mapping all existing and permitted renewable energy sites, and follow by clearly identifying areas of future potential. This is not just fair, it's essential. We need to reward progress, we need to protect ambition, and we need to honour leadership. And I ask you to give that commitment here today.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach.
Well, to thank the Deputy in the first instance for raising what is a key issue for the country, a key issue for Europe, which is the development of renewable energy and the mechanisms to enable us to do that. And I think there's no doubt that Ireland is a wind energy success story, particularly in terms of onshore wind. But because of a lot of controversy around locations in certain aspects, that narrative doesn't often get told. Like we get a greater share of our electricity, 35% on average, from onshore wind farms than anywhere else in Europe. And we're world leaders in integrating renewables onto our grid, which can now take up to 75% of total electricity demand from wind farms. And Irish wind farms provided 48% of Ireland's power last February. And last January, a significant milestone was reached when the state reached over 5 gigawatts of installed wind capacity. So that's halfway to the state's 2030 onshore climate action targets for renewable wind energy. Now, the big challenge ahead is translating that into offshore wind and ensuring that we reach our targets in respect of the offshore wind agenda. And that's what we're going to do. In terms of the Midlands, it is true that the Midlands, and you've instanced the county of Offaly, has experienced the greatest economic disruption, closure of power factories and so forth. Just transition has been of a help, but I take your point that it hasn't fully sort of met, if you like, the losses that have occurred with good industrial jobs and so forth that people had, and work that they had in Board and Mona. But there is a transition going on, without question, within the Midlands, which is quite exciting and quite interesting, in my view, and I think will power the economy of the Midlands into the future. The National Just Transition Fund has dispersed about 16 million. The EU Just Transition Programme is providing up to 169 million. And the programme has announced a selection of 91 operations, totaling about 91 million so far. You've mentioned tourism infrastructure, about 36 million in grants from Fáilte Ireland for trails and supports for businesses, trying to grow the visitor economy in the Midlands area itself. On the mapping, and the National Parks and Wildlife Service, by the way, the Toker wetland restoration project, that's about 12 million being provided under that towards survey and restoration planning. And then there's a network of electric vehicle charging, 18 million in terms of, that's across the country. In terms of the mapping, it's part of the RED directive, and I've asked the various departments to speed up and accelerate the transposition of the RED directive, because that's critical on a number of fronts. First of all, to deal with the planning issues around offshore wind, but also critically in terms of the mapping issue that you've spoken about.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy.
Come back to you.
Thanks. Thanks, Taoiseach. And, you know, I fully agree in terms of our renewable energy journey. We have hit many important milestones. And as part of that journey, Offaly has been to the forefront. But in addition to mapping, we also need to see a greater level of community recognition. And I believe, in tandem with renewable zoning, we must now overhaul the Community Benefit Fund under Renewable Energy Support Scheme. The current €2 per megawatt hour is too diluted. There's too many small pots, there's too many committees, and there's too little impact. And the more infrastructure, the more complex it becomes when you've got overlap of a cluster of wind farms in particular. Yes, retain the near neighbour scheme and support local community groups, but we also need to be bold with strategic investment. Let's use this fund to deliver real change and lasting projects, whether it be road upgrades over peat foundation, employment hubs, business parks, modern community centres and playgrounds, and empower our towns and villages to ensure further enhancements. All projects
Thank you, Deputy.
that will leave a lasting
Time
legacy
is up, Deputy
and truly making
Taoiseach.
a difference. Offaly just didn't endure
Deputy,
transition.
the time
We
is
led
up.
it, and now we need support that
Taoiseach.
reflects that leadership.
Thank you very much, Deputy, again for that. Just on the mapping question, as part of the RED directive, there is a legal obligation, as you know, on Member States by May of 25 to have carried out a coordinated mapping for the deployment of renewable energy-related infrastructure at national territory level. Now, under the directive, it's to show those areas available for renewable energy and those that have the potential to be developed for renewable energy. You also want that which has already happened to be mapped. I don't see an issue with that. I relate that back to the Minister. In terms of the Community Benefit Fund, again, we can review those. But actually, a lot of countries have spoken positively, actually, about the fact that we do have that community benefit dimension to our renewable strategies, particularly to wind. Certainly, I think the Minister would be open to reviewing the Community Benefit Fund itself. I'm more interested, so I shouldn't say more, but I'm particularly interested in getting the mapping done.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And in creating, the Red Directive is particularly significant in terms of being able to
Thank you,
have an
Taoiseach.
overarching clause that says this is for the benefit
Time is up.
of society as a whole, that we get an offshore wind farm built because
Thank
of climate
you,
change and so on.
We now
And that's what we
move
need, I think.
to questions on policy or legislation. I'll have to ask deputies to comply with your time slot, which is a minute response as well as the question. Deputy Mary Lou McDonald.
Taoiseach, I want to return to the issue of your proposed housing czar and the proposal to pay this individual €430,000. Paying somebody a salary of that level, almost €500,000, to take up the responsibilities of the housing minister is cracked, to tell you the God's honest truth. Most people who job share take home half a wage. You want this individual to take home almost $500,000. I don't know, Taoiseach, if you're on a solo run on this. Your friends in Fine Gael seem to think you are. I raised the issue with you yesterday. I asked you to confirm the salary of €430,000. I asked you, more importantly, to justify that salary to people who are struggling very hard, so many of them who can't afford housing or rent. You failed to do that. So having had the night to sleep on it, I'm asking you to come to your senses, to put a stop to this,
Deputy, your time is
or
now
if you
up.
wish to
Thank you,
pursue,
Deputy. I
to
ask
set
to
out very
comply.
clearly that
Taoiseach.
salary level and your
Deputy McDonald,
justification
can you
for
not
it.
see the clock
Thank
and
you.
hear me? Thank you.
I
Taoiseach.
dealt comprehensively with that issue earlier, and the Deputy chose not to raise that issue, fair enough, during leaders' questions. And a Housing Activation Office has been established. It's in the programme for government. I made the point here yesterday that no decision has been made in terms of the person who's going to head that up. I said that to you yesterday, but I did speak also yesterday, I said it to you yesterday, about within the public service there could be secondment. There are people in the public service working in state agency. Please, we're just here, earning substantially above. You know that well. You know it. You've heard of the NTMA, have you? It's going on for the last since 1989 the NTMA was established. You know that. You come in and feign you didn't know it. Of course you know the NTMA is there for 30 years. So no decision has been made in terms of any individual, and the government will decide it. The Minister will progress
Thank you, Taoiseach.
that in the time ahead.
Deputy Ivana Bacik. Deputy Ivana Bacik.
Taoiseach, I want to raise with you the ongoing issue about policing levels in our communities, and across the country. I think we all hear from communities who have immense concerns about the shortage of Gardaí on the streets, lack of community Gardaí, and problems within the Gardaí with low morale. In my own constituency in Dublin Bay South, this week alone we've seen an appalling incidence of antisocial behaviour and quite serious criminality, with gangs congregating around the City Quay and Pearse Street areas, and again just shortage of Garda resources to deal with this. My colleague Deputy Alan Kelly is attending the GRA conference today. It's unfortunate that Minister Jim O'Callaghan will not be there. Deputy Kelly is telling me about the stories he's hearing from Gardaí at the conference about rock-bottom morale, a lack of resourcing, and the numbers of Gardaí collapsing because your government is failing to recruit the numbers of Gardaí that are so badly needed to ensure we have visible and effective policing on our streets.
Taoiseach.
Deputy, Garda numbers are increasing in terms of the numbers being trained through Templemore. I think people have actually commented on the increased number of Gardaí in the streets in Dublin. In more recent times, people have commented positively about that. And I've been talking to the Minister for Justice, and we do need to make sure that as people are coming through Templemore, that we spread that out across the country. And that is the agenda. And that's what we're going to do. We're making progress. I think COVID had a big impact because we lost a vital 2 years in terms of getting a proper throughput in terms of Templemore. But now the applications are high, and there's a lot of progress being made, Deputy, in terms of it, but we need to do far more, and we're going to do that.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Liam Quaid.
Taoiseach, yesterday the solicitor representing the disabled woman known as Grace released a shocking statement on the Farrelly Commission report. Mary Claire Butler said her considered and extensive submissions to the Commission were not included or referred to in any way in the report, and that she felt the need to bring this to light. Grace is a person at the centre of years of many reports into her neglect and her prolonged exposure to risk of abuse in a foster home in County Waterford. She's been tragically failed over and over. She's been at the mercy of years of concealment, deflection and neglect by the HSE and successive governments, and there has been no accountability for any of this. There were already so many questions about the Farrelly Commission before this statement was released yesterday. Do you agree, Taoiseach, that we urgently need to see Senior Counsel Farrelly and Minister Foley appear before the Disability Matters Committee to answer questions on this?
Thank you, Deputy Taoiseach.
I don't see Minister Foley is not responsible for the inquiry or how the inquiry was conducted. So let's not try and politicise this. Let's look at the fact that the Commission of Investigation was established. I think the statement by the General Solicitor for Minors and Wards of Court is very serious. There are limitations around the Commission of Investigation Act. Okay. I've made the point generally that commissions of investigation sometimes don't give the closure or don't give the outcomes that people respond or that people expect and correctly expect, notwithstanding the spending of millions. So this is worrying. I think the Minister is meeting with the General Solicitor for Minors and Wards of Court on behalf of Grace, and I'll get a report back in terms of the outcome of that meeting. But we are in very challenging territory because of how the legal framework governing the establishment of the Commission. The Commission is independent. Everything that transpires within it is within the legal framework around confidentiality and so forth. So it's not simple.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy Roderick O'Gorman.
Taoiseach, the move to renewable energy should be centred on allowing consumers benefit from lower electricity prices. That's why in the last government the Green Party legislated to give customers a legal right to dynamic pricing, where they can benefit from changes to electricity prices and only use electricity when it's at its cheapest rate. But now that right of consumers to benefit from the low price of renewables is being undermined by the regulator, CRU. It's bowed to pressure from electricity suppliers and given them over a year longer to bring in a scheme that consumers could benefit from. Taoiseach, when the cost of living is still so high for so many, do you agree with the Climate Change Advisory Council when they say today that government and the regulator must ensure that electricity suppliers offer customers price plans that allow them to save money? And will you ask your minister to engage with CRU and make it clear to them that they need to protect consumer rights over the profits of suppliers?
You see, Deputy, I mean, the fundamental review didn't happen in terms of the regulatory framework governing energy prices. You know it as well as I do. It relates to user-paid principles, be it commercial, household, and in the investment in the grid in PR5, the price review 5, fell on the user of energy. In our view, and the Minister has established a group to look at the regulatory framework, because there will be huge investment in the grid, more than double of what we've had in the last 5 years. We're going to have to invest in the grid in the coming time ahead. Ultimately, in a sustainable basis, if one wants to achieve what you're suggesting, I think it will mean an amendment to the regulatory framework. That's how I see it. And that's going to take some time to bring about, but it's an issue that we have to deal with, because Ireland has very high energy prices.
Thank you, Taoiseach.
And are likely to continue to have them, given the level of investment that's simply have to go into the grid.
Thank you, Concola. Taoiseach, today the National Meals on Wheels are across the way in Brussels today, looking for more funding. At the moment, 2.8 million meals were provided in 2024, 228,000 users of the services. When they provide a meal to somebody and deliver to them, it's €7 is the cost of the meal, and they charge the person that's getting it €7.